Welcome to Friday, our final day of talks here for the Symposium. So this first session, we are going to talk about our wetland restoration project that's been going on for over a decade. Just real quick, some overall kind of housekeeping items. Please make yourself at home and grab some coffee or snacks in the back. After this session, we will have lunch available. We have another session this afternoon, so we have 5 more talks, so please feel free to stay for that. If you have any questions or need anything, somebody will be at the registration table there that can answer any questions you might have, or I will be around as well. So we're going to go ahead and get this session started. We're going to kick it off with Holly Best, and she is with our DCNR, and talk about the invasive plants and the epic war. Holly.
Thank you, Jeanette. As Jeanette said, my name is Holly Best. I'm one of the assistant park managers here at Presque Isle. Part of my duty is to work with the resource management program, and here at this facility that means a lot of invasive species plant removal. So we're very fortunate at this park. that it's endless job security because we have every invasive plant imaginable. So there's no lack of work to be done. So this presentation kind of summarizes what we've been doing with our invasive species battle, where we are up and including the 2022 data. So basically this park used to not have that many invasive plants, but coming in like the 1980s, we started to see a big balloon of invasive plants coming in from just a little bit of anecdotal information, some monitoring information with different visiting botanists and things. We're starting to notice that we were having a bigger and bigger problem. So in some way, shape, or form, since about the 1990s, someone has been doing invasive species control out here. Back at that time, it was mostly a couple volunteers or an intern or two kind of walking along the roadside edge, clipping with hand clippers. So you can tell that that would be like spitting into a bucket and it wasn't making much of a difference. So we have been very fortunate over the years to be able to enter into a larger project. We get a lot of grant funding now, which I'll talk a little bit about, and we have a lot of different partners that we work with, so now we pretty much can do pretty much the whole program, soup to nuts, and include a whole bunch of different stuff. So I'm just kind of giving you the overview. The rest of the talks in this session will also kind of focus in on a few more of the project areas. So as I mentioned, my project area is pretty much invasive species removal. But just by a show of hands, who has been to Presque Isle before? Who knows a little bit about the park? Yes, very informed audience. So just going over these real quickly. So why do we care? Why is Presque Isle important? Why do we even do this work here? Okay, so if you know anything about the rest of the state, we are the only show in town. We're the only beach. We're the only place that has habitats like this. So we cover all the successional stages. We go from the very new beach to the climax forest and everything in between. So we are home to all of those species that live in all those different varied ecosystems. So it's a very special place. We're on several migration paths. We have a lot of nesting and resting birds and insects located in this area. We also, since we have those special habitats and we're the only beach, anything that lives in that habitat is special and rare in Pennsylvania because it doesn't live anywhere else in Pennsylvania. So it's very important for us to be able to protect those things. We're identified as an important bird area. We're also identified as a national natural landmark. And oh yeah, we also see about over 4 million visitors a year. So we're constantly battling and balancing our human visitation and managing for natural resources. So it's a constant battle and a constant balance. So some of the special species we have here at the park, we do have nesting bald eagle, we have nesting osprey. Those species have relatively in recent history come back. The osprey's only been here for a couple years nesting. We have a couple successful nests. We have that plant in the middle, the yellow one, called a hairy or hoary puccoon. That is only located in one sand barren along the park. So that is a pretty special species, and we're constantly making sure that we're monitoring and maintaining that and maintaining the habitat for it. These little sneaky little green little birds up in here, this is the least bittern. We are seeing a whole lot more, I'm sure Sarah will talk about, and we don't know, which came first, the chicken or the egg. Is it because we're removing invasive plants, or is it because we're looking for them? But we're definitely seeing and hearing a lot more of them these days. We also have this plant over here called lupin or lupine. We have a large population of that on this park, and we're in a working group statewide working group for this plant, and Jen is also on those calls, and everyone else who talks about it says like, well, my 3 plants are doing good. And then we talk about like our huge, like vast quarter acre of plants are doing really good. So we just have the special places for these things to grow. We also have common terns. Typically they visit here. They have just this past year successfully had a nest, successfully had young, but something took those young out. So we have not fledged young yet. However, we're getting closer and closer with bringing them back. We also have this little sneaky guy called the Blandings turtle, not found anywhere else in Pennsylvania. Historic range for them is only here and one other location in Pennsylvania. So, and we were so low in numbers with this that they couldn't even call this a population. They would find like 1 male, 1 female, couldn't never tell if their paths crossed. Therefore, we may never have more turtles. So there's a kind of a reintroduction project happening with this and a lot of monitoring happening with that species. And then we also have these little guys over here. These are piping plover or plover, whichever way you want to say it. We have them out at Gull Point. They have been successfully nesting here for many years after a long hiatus from the park. And we're pretty much going to claim a victory that we are maintaining these sandy open areas for them to be able to successfully nest and survive and thrive out there. So we work with a lot of invasive species targets. The grant funding that we utilize pretty much covers anything on the emergent edge, so it's a lot of water edge plants. We don't necessarily go into the aquatic species, and we don't go to many upland species, but where we're treating the aquatic edge, if there are upland species in that immediate area, we will treat them as well, just because we're basically using the same chemical. So some of the early targets are garlic mustard. This is pretty much something you have to pull out before it goes to seed, so that's a spring treatment. Honeysuckle is year-round. Pretty much the entire understory of the park is infiltrated with honeysuckle, and they're all invasive. We have very few native honeysuckle plants on the park. So we try to get rid of these when we can. The problem with this is there's so much seed in the soil underneath it that you really have to have a good plant to put in its place. Otherwise, removing it doesn't really do anything. The other thing is, you know all those birds we talked about? They really like to nest and rest in those honeysuckle. It's good cover for them and good protection. So we maintain those in some areas. We have a lot of Oriental bittersweet. That is pretty much worked on with a volunteer crew of people cutting those stems, but goodness, that's just everywhere. We have a ton of Japanese knotweed in some localized areas. So this is relatively managed by our intern crew, but it's an extensive process. It's a couple years of cutting and spraying, alternating treatments to be able to get rid of that. The big targets, these are our big ones that we deal with. Over the years, these have always been continual treatments. Phragmites was the biggest target that we started dealing with first. It comes into an area, makes a monoculture, and actually it's allelopathic, so it puts a poison down into the soil, nothing else will grow there. Once we get rid of the frag, the next thing it comes in is an arrow-leafed cattail. This little guy is also very prolific, creates a monoculture, is so thick that things can't get through it. Animals can't even hardly traverse it. Purple loosestrife has been exploding since our high water levels a couple years ago, so I'm assuming everything just kind of germinated in the seed bank. This thing is so cute, but it's flowering rush and it's bad. So it started out when I started working in the park and doing the treatments in like 2009, we'd see a few plants here and there. This is now pretty much throughout the entire lagoon system, so we're constantly treating this as well. I'm also assuming it had something to do with the high water levels. And Ailanthus, this is a plant, it's definitely an upland species. This tree, we want to get rid of this because this is a host plant for some other terrible species like spotted lanternflies. So we want to make sure that we get rid of those things where we can. So we basically have the concept here of like our best management practices. We consider it like peeling back the layers. So if you consider going into our lagoon system, most of you are familiar with the park, there's only so much you can get to. So we reach it from the trail side, land side, we reach it from boats, and we're always just kind of peeling back that layer. So if you go back into the lagoons, you'll definitely see the layers of treatments. You'll see 2 years ago treatment where the plants are down and to the surface of the water. The next layer, they're dead and they're kind of sinking down in the water. And then behind them are happily growing invasive plants that we didn't spray yet. So those will be our next targets. Around those special species like the cocoon and the lupine, we also have one stand of native Phragmites. Ooh. So we want to make sure that we are pushing back from those areas. So anywhere where they're getting crowded in with invasives, we kind of find, we gain a foothold, and we push back and maintain those habitats as open. So we use a whole bunch of different treatment methods here. Pretty much as simple as something called glove of death. So there's all cool names for these treatments. So glove of death is basically you wear a nitrile glove, cover it with a cotton glove, spray it with herbicide, and you're using this in areas where we're usually restoration areas where we're planting good plants, where there's a lot of good native vegetation coming up and we don't want to do any harm to anything else. You're just running your hand up the stem of the bad plant to be able to just identify that plant, just take that plant out and not have any overspray or any treatments, any herbicide going anywhere else in the environment. On the other end of the spectrum would be a helicopter. So we have 3 times now brought a helicopter into the park. I'll go over some numbers with that. But though the helicopter is used in areas where we still have large monocultures of bad plants. Typically those areas we cannot get to. Like I said, we're pushing from the land, pushing from the water. These are those large areas in the middle, mostly in the middle of the lagoon system, some out at Gull Point, where we just can't get to it otherwise. We do walk around this whole entire park. Interns, this is job security for interns all summer with backpacks, and they are spot treating in a lot of areas that have been either partially restored or fully restored. We will continually have to go back to all those areas and walk through and get any of those bad plants that are popping up. This is our airboat. This was pretty much a game changer when we received this through grant funding a few years back. This enables us to just kind of scoot right by these plants and still continually spray into them. We also have a large pontoon boat that we put a big 100-gallon tank sprayer on the front, and then a whole little parade of interns hop into the water like these guys, and they walk a big 50-foot hose back in, and they just go into this big thick stuff and spray around and come back out. Like they're doing here as well. So we have pretty much all the tools that we need at this point. We just have to keep doing what we're doing because it never stops. So summary for 2022, there are two different maps here. This first map over here, this is the terrestrial and boat work, let's call it that. So this is where interns were on the ground. This is also where our education staff and ranger staff were in boats. So you can see they kind of went all around the aquatic edges. They went back in some ponds. Interns went all in these inland trails. All of this work, we captured two different numbers. So all of the red is just the treated area. So that's 69.41 acres. So when we consider it treated, that is either a shovel went in the ground to dig something up, something got pulled out of the ground, something got cut off, or something got sprayed. So that is active work that's being done. However, the area protected, which is not necessarily on this because the overlaps would be so great that it would block out most of this detail. The area protected and started using herbicide in 2009, 2010. These numbers were just about identical because everywhere we were going was bad and we were treating. So if we protected 300 acres, we were treating 300 acres. So we started seeing this tipping point back in like 2019, we saw it a little bit, 2021, we saw it bigger, that this area protected is huge compared to this smaller treated number now. So this is a fantastic way to show that what we're doing is working. We're still going into all the same areas, but we're making those populations of invasives much smaller. Then this is specifically the helicopter treated area. So these are actually the protected blocks. So the area protected is 371 acres. The helicopter treated about 114 acres. So we gave him kind of his marching orders and spray blocks, and he just kind of took off from Beach 11 and went out to several different areas making treatments. So in total, we're looking at numbers that are bigger than we've ever seen for areas protected. They're always larger, of course, when you have a helicopter in the mix, but 643 acres approximately for protected and 184 treated. So just a couple images of some success stories that we have. We probably all will have this picture because we all love it, so we all make sure we put this in our presentations. So this was an intern that started in the project. This is an area that's located between Beach 10 and Thompson Circle on the lakeside. All the way up to the roadside edge, this is Phragmites, and it was huge. This is a real size person. This is not a miniature person or anything. So you can see how tall this was, all the way out to the roadside edge. So this area in particular was sprayed with a helicopter. It was mowed by maintenance, and it was also continually retreated by interns. And today, this is what it looks like. We call this Surprise Pond because, surprise, there was a pond in there. So, because we couldn't even tell what it looked like when it looked like this, and now look what we did. So there's a whole bunch of diversity in here now. This is one of the propagation areas. So they're planting natives in this area, and now this has turned into just about only backpack use and glove of death because we have so many good things coming up. Just one more image of a success story. So this is Leo's Landing. It's also that observation deck called the Feather. So the pictures are a little skewed, but they're roughly in the same location. You can see here, this is Phragmites and arrowleaf cattail all the way up to the platform. Then we opened it up. As soon as you get rid of the plants, the water will fill back in. There's a lot of good sedges in here, a lot of good native vegetation. This is, once again, something we're always going to have to mop up and treat every year just to maintain it like this, but another good success story. So, as I mentioned, there's a whole bunch of different partners. They're going to speak in turn coming up, but we do get grant funding for all of this work. None of it is provided by the park at all, which is kind of sad but true. But we are fortunate to be in the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative area. The current grant I'm finishing up right now was administered by Ducks Unlimited. The grant we're going into next, and the other group has already started, is administered by the Regional Science Consortium, so there's a large partnership here. The RSC helps with all of the monitoring. You'll also hear about some plant monitoring with Penn West California. Go Native Erie does all the propagation stuff and working with the Weed Warrior volunteers, and Erie Bird Observatory, which assists with the bird monitoring. So that is what I have for you. Does anyone have any questions on that? And you too could be a park intern if you wanted to. Just send me your cover letter and resume by the end of January. Amber.
Previous park intern.
Previous park intern.
I was just wondering, so as you treat all of the more terrestrial riparian zone invasives and you start to open up the water areas, do you think that you'll eventually have to move towards treating more aquatic species, like if they invade here?
So we do have all of the aquatic invasives as well already. We have a separate permit that's not part of this project. We have a separate permit that covers us for treatments around all of our boat launches, all of our boat ramps, the marina, all those kinds of things that we continually treat those a couple times a year to keep those areas open. So that work is kind of already being done, not necessarily with this project though. Oh, Mark. I mean, Mark?
Are there any up-and-coming invasive species that you're concerned about? Here's something that you haven't seen before.
So I've heard about some other ones that are potentially coming. It seems like they're more active in more open moving bodies of water and along streams and rivers, from what I hear from my counterparts in Ohio. So we're keeping an eye out for stuff all the time, and anybody who's out on the park, please report things that look weird if you ever see anything. We're not really built well for rapid response, so that's unfortunate because we might not be able to just take care of something when we see it, although it built up quite an arsenal of chemical weaponry and also different tools and supplies, so we could probably address things pretty quickly, but we're always keeping the eye out for new up-and-coming invasives. Jerry?
Are you planning on setting aside a special garden of invasives to educate people for the future?
Well, Jen does propagate some invasives, and she has them.
For germination testing?
Yes, just
For
to,
seedlings.
yes, for doing a study and research and determining what's there. So she does have a couple things just, just to be able to show people if we ever get to the point, hey, there's no more Phragmites on the park. We have one in a pot. Ode to invasives.
Do you have any idea the volume of pest or herbicides that you've used? Is it changing? Obviously, the helicopter thing would change it drastically, but let's say from the terrestrial side of things,
Yes.
you know, are you having to use less?
Yes, for sure. It's all reportable. We have all that data because we have to report. So for us to be able to apply herbicide on this park, it's a permit that has to be approved by DEP, Fish and Boat, Fish and Wildlife Service, and also DCNR folks. So everybody has to approve of us applying that. There are really stringent application records that we have to maintain. And when people hear that we're spraying herbicide, know that we're spraying an herbicide mix, and about 2% of that mix is active chemical. The rest of it is mostly water. There's a little bit of a sticker in there to help it stick to the plants that we're targeting. There's also some defoaming agent. And there's also blue dye. So that is so it indicates what we've sprayed so we don't overspray something. So of any of the mixture that we're putting out, it's 2% chemical. But yeah, we have all of those records and we definitely have not. That's why I have a bunch of chemicals still, because I was buying at like when we started spraying, and we have not gone through the chemical like we used to. So that's been really good. The other thing is we don't use the chemical where we don't have to. So interns don't love it, but like where we can shovel plants out, like we use a shovel. And we could use chemical, but we don't. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, our next presentation is kind of continuing the story. So we talked about getting rid of the invasives and then where we go from here. So the wetland restoration and propagation updates, and Jen Salem and Jeremiah Covert with the Regional Science Consortium are going to present these updates.
Okay. Oh, you know what? So we're going to give a brief presentation. Let me get my timer going. About a project that we have been working on for a number of years. And I'm just going to give you a very brief history. For those of you that aren't familiar with the project, Holly kind of did give a large-scale overview of the project. But the plant propagation part of this huge wetland restoration grant did not start until 2016. So we were brought in and contracted to grow plants for the restoration sites that had been treated, kind of went through a lot of criteria and decision making about which sites to start with. And what we do is propagate everything in-house. So we don't buy any plant material in. We make all the plants that are going back into these restoration projects. And we do that with the help of our tiny propagation greenhouse here at the Tom Ridge Center, and then we have another growing facility down on Presque Isle State Park. And I just said everything's propagated on site from seeds and cuttings. I'm going to touch on that because we do have a little bit of an update on some of our propagation methods. And we also are kind of unique because this is the only project like this in any state park in Pennsylvania. So I kind of feel like what makes us special and what makes the project unique and interesting is the fact that we don't buy anything in. If you're buying plants for your own house, that's fine, but because we have a large natural area and we want to preserve not only the specific plants that are there, but the genotypes of those plants, we want to use plants, and we have the ability to do that. Jerry and I are both propagators at heart, so we can make a plant out of anything pretty much. So, well, not a rock, but anyway, but that's kind of what we love to do. That is our skill set. And so we're always experimenting, like Holly mentioned. We even do germination tests on invasive plant species because we're looking at